white flag in his body to
Mm.
just surrender to all the toxins. It was the DTAP booster that he had when he was 15 months. He had a few words, he was walking, he was very interactive and all the things, and those kind of disappeared over the several months following that booster. He had a big reaction, and they told me, of course, circle it with a pen and give him Benadryl and give him Tylenol. And Tylenol opens the blood-brain barrier. He lost all of his speaking. He didn't say anything for probably the next year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, he was very, very quiet all the time. He met with integrative specialists to figure out what was going on. He was diagnosed with candida overgrowth, clostridium overgrowth. He had almost no iron in his system, and he had 11 out of 21 toxic heavy metals at like way over the acceptable level, which kind of have a problem with the acceptable level of things like arsenic in our systems. So a few days after I started giving him that drink, we had an IEP meeting, and he suddenly, like, his focus had just gone insanely awesome. He went from, losing focus after one or two cards to popping all 20 cards down in a week. And she whipped her head around. She goes, "What did you give him?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble."
Welcome to Cultivating Change, everyone. I'm your host, Alex Corey, and we're going to get right into today's episode. For all of you mothers out there, this is a story, and I hear this at least once a week from working in water. I get a lot of mothers whose eyes have been blown open, or just parents, to heavy metal and environmental toxicity, but heavy metals specifically, lead, arsenic, cadmium, those things. There's a lot of heavy metals out there, and they're in more sources than we would like to believe. Today's guest is Alysun Caldwell, who works in gut health and has a very profound story with her son essentially going nonverbal, correlated right after a injection, early childhood, and just having severe developmental delays and being diagnosed on the autism spectrum. We're going to go over her journey and her son's journey and what can be on the other side of that if you take health and nutrition into your own hands. I appreciate your time today, first off. And
Absolutely.
I am very excited for this because I hear similar stories to yours every week, to the point of like, oh, this is like almost, I think it's one of the biggest topics, heavy metals.
Yeah.
And it's always inspiring to hear people who have made it through. Then, like, this isn't a, like with any medical thing, it's like this isn't a permanent life condition, right? It's like the
Right.
body can heal. If you could just give a brief introduce yourself and what you do, and then we'll get into the story and your journey through heavy metals.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm Alysun Caldwell, and I currently work in gut health and just wellness overall. But I was really kind of brought there from this journey of treating my son with heavy metal toxicity and just generally a lot of gut imbalance and stuff. So that brings us back about 15 years. He was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 3, and he didn't start out with that same set of behaviors. So when he got the diagnosis and the pediatricians were like, "Well, you'll learn to manage his behaviors." And I was like, "What? Like, he didn't start out like that." So I will caveat everything else I'm about to say with, I am not a medical professional. I don't have formal training on all this, but I do have pretty much like expert level knowledge on my kid. Because, when you have a kid who needs your help, you're going to move heaven and earth and dig up all sorts of information to try to help them. So
Yeah.
that's what I ended up doing. So this is a lot of personal experience and a whole lot of diving into research, looking on both sides of things. We really, really dove heavy into that for about 7 years. We met with integrative specialists to figure out what was going on. He was diagnosed with candida overgrowth, clostridium overgrowth. He had almost no iron in his system, and he had 11 out of 21 toxic heavy metals at like way over the acceptable level, which kind of have a problem with the acceptable level of things like arsenic in our systems. That was just kind of something I sort of tend to do is just look at the basics and go, wait,
Yeah.
why is there an acceptable level of that?
Yeah.
And it's, because it's so prevalent in so many of our things, like our water and stuff, where we're getting, they say just trace amounts here, trace amounts there. But when you're getting it hundreds of times a day in trace amounts for years on end, causes problems. So,
Right.
um,
What happened
yeah.
prior to three? So you noticed that around three. What was there any lead up to that, or what was the sort of context, or how was there any event or any series of events that led to that diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So he developed pretty normally up until about a year, little over a year. He did have some reflux problems. So we noticed there was some gastrointestinal issues. And so we had to, stop nursing and go and like add cereal to the bottle and all the things. Not my favorite, but I was following the pediatrician's advice because I trusted what they were doing. Um, we were vaccinating on schedule, but I had started to get a little bit concerned about that. It was around the time where they were talking about maybe MMR contributing to that type of diagnosis. And I was like, I don't think it's going to be one thing. And so I, dug into all that. And actually, I told them I was really nervous about it. So they said, oh, no, there's no thimerosal in this MMR. And I was like, all right. Um, I don't think that that was the one that triggered his white flag in his body to
Mhm.
just surrender to all the toxins. It was the DTAP booster that he had when he was 15 months. He was he had a few words, he was walking, he was very interactive and all the things, and those kind of disappeared over the several months following that booster. He had a big reaction, and they told me, of course, circle it with a pen and give him Benadryl and give him Tylenol. And Tylenol opens the blood-brain barrier, so all of the, less than savory ingredients that were in there went straight into his brain, including things like aluminum, mercury, whatever, all that's in there went straight into his brain because he was given Tylenol. So, those are all things I found out after the fact when I dug into all the research, but it was a long road of figuring out how to forgive myself for not knowing better,
Yeah.
because I know that there could have been prevention of that decline. Um, but you know, you can't know what you don't know yet. So
Yeah.
all
And
I
what were
do
the
these days
behavioral
is
changes
encourage.
again that you noticed?
Oh, he lost all of his speaking. He didn't say anything for probably the next year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, he was very, very quiet all the time. And then he figured out he wanted things and we didn't know how to read his mind. So then he would get very frustrated and, meltdowns, obviously. Any toddler's going to have meltdowns, but it's just very, very different when that is the case. When they're really struggling and they don't know how to calm themselves down, and then they just can't. And so we dealt with a lot of that over those 18 months. I mean, we went through multiple meltdowns a day, all the things, like he just was really struggling and he couldn't communicate with us at all. And we actually found a specialist in Florida that my mom was talking to who said, well, maybe try omegas, see if he needs some extra omegas. And I was like, all right. So they told us to give him, it was like a bear-shaped gummy vitamin that had omegas in it. I'm like, oh, great. I didn't really love the fact that it had a bunch of sugar, but I was like, well, if this is going to help him, gave it to him for a while, didn't notice any difference. They actually gave us a little packet called Core Omega. I think it's still out on the market these days, but it was like almost a yogurt type consistency. So I could give it to him, and it was an adult dosage. And he was 3 still. He was an adult dosage of Omegas. And I gave it to him. And within like a few days, he started kind of copying what I was doing. Like I was just sitting at the breakfast table with him, and I was just, sitting with my hand on my head, and he looked at me and he did exactly what I was doing. And I was like, whoa, that hasn't happened in a long time. And then within a week, he was making noises I hadn't heard him make, like trying to speak to us. And I was like, I need more of this stuff. And then our pediatrician, the developmental pediatrician, actually, because that was right before he was diagnosed, they actually told me, well, that was probably a coincidence. And I was like, just thought to myself, didn't say that out loud, although these days I might have. I didn't say, if you had given him a medication and I gave you those results, you would have broken your own arm off to pat yourself on the back and tell me that you're fixing my child. And, but because it was a supplement, they were not very keen on that. But within a
Yeah.
couple months, he had over 200 repeatable words. He was using 200 or 300 signs. As fast as he could go learning all the things because he was finally getting the nutrition that his brain needed. So, we were able to start to communicate a little bit, learned at that point. I had met another gal who was recovering her son, and she said, "You need to give up gluten and dairy." And I was like, "That's all he eats." Like,
Yeah.
and we had two other kids. We've done the whole "you're going to eat this or you just don't eat right now." I tried that with my daughters. No problem. You're not going to eat it? Whatever. You don't have to eat right now. You won't starve in one meal. And the next meal, they were like, "Okay, I'll eat whatever she puts in front of me." He didn't eat for a day and a half. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's not okay." It's a whole new level of commitment from this one.
Yeah.
But he was like only eating things that had gluten and dairy in them. So she said, "Get rid of them." And I was like, "I don't know how I'm going to do that." So she gave me a book, actually written by Dr. Julie Buckley, who's a pediatrician in Florida. Not sure if she's still practicing or not at this point, but she had recovered her own daughter from the spectrum after kindergarten boosters. All the things that her pediatrician side said, "This doesn't happen." And her mom's side said, "I watched that happen."
Right.
So she puts it in very understandable terms and really relatable stuff. Like the genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
So there's something in there that's not working right. In my son's case, it was toxin processing. His body just wasn't able to get it out. They tested him actually for MTHFR gene
Hmm.
mutation for that, methylation,
Yeah.
and he was okay with that. He didn't have it. So that was good news, but just everything was just clogged up and he couldn't get anything out. So as all
Yeah.
those metals went in, none of them came back out, nothing. And I mean, it's hard enough to get them out when your toxin processing is
Right.
working well.
I just
But when
finished a
it's not,
chelation protocol. Yeah, it's difficult even as an adult. You have to do yeah, it's a thing. Like
yeah,
it's a whole protocol. So when you're a kid, that's not happening. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And actually, we talked to the pediatrician, or not pediatrician, we talked to an integrative specialist about it because after we, had gone through all this stuff, we did manage to change his diet, which drastically reduced the number of meltdowns and frustrations that he was
Mm.
having from like, up to 5 a day to like 1 or 2 a week,
Oh
which
wow.
is far more manageable, far more like a typical toddler, you know, wanting what they can't have.
Right.
So it drastically changed everything there. And we were like, okay, so there's something to all this, right? We changed the diet. I was like, what's next? So
What did the
at that,
diet change look like? Because I'm sure people would be very curious what you did. broad
yeah,
broad strokes.
broad strokes. It is not something you can do in a day.
Oh,
Broad
sure.
strokes it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to remove things slowly enough that they have a chance to adjust. Because as an adult, if you have to, for example, take gluten out of your diet, you're like, "Oh
Right.
gosh, they just diagnosed me with celiac. I have to remove gluten right now." Like you can tell yourself, "Okay, I'm going to eat this gluten-free bread." And it's not going to taste exactly the same, but you know that it's better and that you need to do that instead. So you can do it. You can't do that with a kid.
Right.
So, as a toddler, they can't make that jump. So we had to very slowly transition out the things that he was eating. So we gave him gluten free treats and snacks a lot because I was like, if I need to remove it, I need to at least do it with stuff he can eat
Yeah.
and stuff he will eat, and then worry about getting in better things. So we kind of did that plan. We had a removal plan for all the gluten and all the casein, which is the protein in
Yeah.
dairy.
Yeah.
And when your gut is not healthy, it mimics an opiate molecule when it's improperly broken down. So that's the gluten protein and the dairy protein. So basically, you've drugged your kid with a sandwich. And they're having that same type of reaction and addiction to it. And so it's a difficult process to remove. It has to go slowly enough that it's manageable for them. And it just takes a whole lot of patience. But I was like, you know what? It's already hard. This is hard, but this has hope. And the other
Right.
one didn't. The doctor said, you'll learn to manage his behaviors. That's not hope. That was miserable. And I was like, if I do all this stuff and nothing changes, at least I know I've tried and I've
Yeah.
done everything I could do to help my kid. Worst case scenario, we're in the exact same spot, and I've checked off that box of that did not do anything different for us.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's all trial and error. Yeah, that's what I've done, had to do my entire. I didn't have anything like that, but I am definitely a trial and error person. What you
yep.
mentioned, what do you, if you remember the heaviest level? You said he had 11 out of 21 toxic
Oh,
metals.
yes.
Do you remember the big ones?
Cadmium actually was his highest, but the doctor actually said that that may have just been when we used DMSA as the chelating agent.
Yeah.
And so he said that may have just been the one that was most easily available and therefore bonded and came out. So when we were doing the testing and things like that, that's what showed up. He goes, that doesn't mean the other stuff isn't in there or isn't even as high. It just means it's not available because it's stuck deeper in the tissues and in the organs, and it's not able to process out of the body. So
I got you. Yeah,
he
similar
had,
with like a hair test mineral analysis. Some people will be like,
mhm,
that's not necessarily representative of what you have. That's what the body got out. So it sounds like with
right,
this procedure, it's not, you can't just look inside the body. So it's what came out whenever we tried to pull it out, so to speak.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So he had low level lead poisoning. And when I looked into it, I learned that low level lead poisoning actually contributes to an overabsorption of cadmium.
Oh, that's a nightmare. Synergistic poisoning.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. And then, kept digging deeper because that's what I was doing and found out, I'm like, how in the world does this kid get this much cadmium? Like, where does it even come from? Turns out it's in printing inks a lot of times. And I
Oh.
read that and went, oh, okay. He had pica when he was a baby and he ate everything that wasn't food,
Oh.
including books, lots of hard books that you give to toddlers. So, usually they'll gnaw on them a little bit, but like he, I guess, ingested enough. And with the low level lead poisoning was increasing his cadmium
Mm.
absorption. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it's one of those things where you find it after the fact and you
Yeah.
look back and go, oh, okay. All right. Now we have to figure out what to do moving forward.
All right.
So we've done a lot, and we worked with an integrative specialist in Raleigh. He helped us test for all of these things. He was the one that did the testing that showed all those metals that were in his system. And of course, my mom reaction was get it out of his system right now. Like, what do I do? Do we hook him up to an IV? Do we just flush it all out? And he was like, you can't do that with these. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, if you just try to flush it all out as fast as possible, it tends to kind of recirculate and
Mm.
reabsorb somewhere else. And I was like, oh. And he goes, that it's just not how this works. He goes, I know it sounds really scary. He's like, but you've got to go slowly through it. Like you said, it's a whole process. Um, so he's like, you've got to go slowly through it, but you have to get his gut healthy first so that he's, able to detox properly and his system is working better. Like we've got all of these things we have to address
Mm.
before we really dive into that. It's going to help a little bit in the beginning, and then we can dive into chelation more once we have, a little bit more healthy digestion and healthy toxin processing and all that. So,
Yeah. I think that's a huge point. There's tons of detox protocols for
yeah.
like adults online, but the thing is like you can't just jump into a chelation protocol. You have to make sure your
Yeah.
detox pathways are open first. if
Right.
if things can't move, you're just sending them back in your bloodstream. It's going to be a nightmare.
Right. You've
Yeah.
moved it from, your brain to your liver
Right.
or from like a lung into your kidneys. I don't know. I mean, they're just wherever it was,
Yeah.
it, yeah, you might pull it out of that tissue and that organ, but it's just going to go somewhere else if your body can't properly process it out. So,
Right. Wow. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, I see lead all the time in water, but I rarely see cadmium. So that's really good to know. It's like, yeah, where are
that's
these
why I was
metals
so
found?
shocked. Yeah,
Right.
I was like, how, I mean, lead, I was like, maybe, but there's no lead in any paint anymore. So I'm like, how in the world did this kid get lead poisoning? That is still kind of a mystery, but the
Yeah.
cadmium made sense with the low level lead poisoning. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, and
Interesting.
then of course, all of those things contribute to candida overgrowth
Yeah.
in the body because, the toxic metals, heavy metals are all contributing to a very acidic environment. And that's where candida thrives. And then you've got gut imbalances. So it really just all works together. And
Yeah.
they're still studying all that kind of relationship between candida overgrowth and toxic heavy metals. So it's I'm sure more is going to be coming out about that, but it's definitely a very close relationship between those two things.
I totally agree. And that's why I wanted to get this conversation down because the more I see come out, the more I'm like, this is a root cause. Heavy metal
Hmm.
poisoning is a root cause of,
Yep.
I mean, people tie parasites to it as a food source. Yeah, it acidifies.
Hmm.
There's like the tricky part is always trying to figure out what set everything else off, what started the chain reaction, because you can pick out the
Hmm.
symptoms and the manifestations like the candida and try to get rid of that. And I watch people do that all the time. And I have my own issues, not with candida, but with everything else. And the tricky part is like, what started this? Because if you're
Yeah.
just band-aiding something, it's going to come back. So heavy metals, as far as I've been able to see, are the catalyst for a number of different chronic, pretty like
Hmm.
pervasive and intense things. Like, most people nonverbal will be at your son's age, but it
Yep.
shows up totally differently in adults with heavy metal poisoning. Like things just don't work well. Like,
Right. Yeah. Total brain fog,
right.
and you're just lethargic and you don't sleep well. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's just a ton of things that, like you said, it's all kind of tied back to that
Yeah.
because that's contributing to all sorts of imbalances within the body, immune dysfunction.
Yeah.
I mean, how many autoimmune diseases do we have going right now? And one of the
Right.
first things toxic heavy metals do is damage the immune system function.
Right. Yeah.
So,
The first time I learned how they actually worked, and then we'll jump back in your story. When I interviewed one of the engineers of a water company that I work with, he started in water because of mercury and arsenic poisoning from his son.
mhm.
And he was just
Oh,
like, it
wow.
took me a long time to figure out why these are actually bad because the research back then, this was like 30 years ago, wasn't what it is now. And he's like, they chelate and
Yeah.
bind to signaling pathways. So like mercury blocks a sulfohydryl pathway, which is your immune system's like help
Hmm.
build this protein. It's basic DNA communication. So things just
Right.
don't get built and they block that. So it's essentially like, they're carcinogens, but they're not giving you cancer. They're blocking like glands, endocrine system, and immune system from
Hmm.
talking at all, which is terrifying to think about.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because those are the things that are all working together to keep the cells from going
Right.
haywire and causing cancer issues. I mean, we have a doctor that we still work with, and he talks about, you know, cancer isn't supposed to be this crazy abnormal thing. Like we
Right.
all have cells going haywire here and there. The problem is we don't have a system anymore that can tolerate
Yep.
helping it and fixing those things and going, oh, that cell not doing what it's supposed to do, and just break it
Yeah.
down and moving on.
Yeah. It's
And
just
so we
chaos
have
all
to
the time.
be
Yeah.
right. We have to be better about supporting immune system and endocrine function. And like you said, all of that, all of those things are working
Yeah.
together. So,
Okay. So I pulled you away from your story. So diagnosed chelation protocol to find out the metals, cadmium, low levels of lead, and then started removing gluten, casein, dairy. And then what was the progression from there? What did you notice? What else did you have to change?
oh my gosh, once we, got his diet changed, he was so much better off. Like I could take him places and do things where, I was really struggling to function as a mom, as a person, as a wife. Like we were in survival mode for a long time. So we were able to do more things. He was happier. Um, but we still had a long way to go because he was still full of metals because, we hadn't
Yeah.
done any of that stuff yet. So that was kind of when we started working with an integrative specialist, and they put him
What age
on
is
all
this?
sorts of, he was about 3.5
Okay.
by this point. So, I mean, we didn't waste any time. Once
Yeah.
we knew that something was going on and something was wrong, they were like, it went pretty quick to, okay, what can we do to help? And when we started to see things changing and, language coming, and like he was so much more pleasant and
Mm.
happier, and because he felt better.
Mhm.
So we
Mm.
were like, okay, this is definitely the road we want to go down. And we had moved because we're military, so we had moved from Virginia to North Carolina. We saw a doctor who had been out of Raleigh, and he worked a lot with like cancer patients and Lyme patients and things like that. And he did work with kids on the spectrum. And I was like, all right, what do we got? What do we do? And he did a whole bunch of different testing. Every bodily fluid has been tested, all the things that you don't want to think about doing. We did all that. Um, like I said, he was diagnosed with candida overgrowth, clostridium overgrowth. By kindergarten age, he was having iron infusions by IV because we couldn't get things absorbing in his gut because he was
Mm.
struggling so much to just repair and heal in his gut lining. We'd been doing L-glutamine and all these supplements and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
we did B12 injections for a while. And things would kind of work and then not work and then work and then not work. And it was just a very, honestly, a very frustrating process because you want to
Yeah.
see something work and continue to work and just get better and better. And it never worked like that. It was very much a roller coaster of things were going right, going well. We were healing certain aspects, whatever it was. And then something else would happen and we would go down again. And then we would come back up on something and go back down. I mean, it was just a lot.
Yeah. So there was no
um,
consistent progress. It was some good days, some bad days, off and on.
there was a consistent trajectory of
Okay.
progress, but it was very much going up and down along that very
Yeah.
gradual
Pretty even.
increase.
Yeah.
So we did all sorts of other stuff. We did the ABA therapy, and they said, hey, he's done amazing this first year. Can we use everything that you did? Like, can we use that for what's possible with ABA to tell the other people? And I said,
What is
you
ABA?
absolutely. Oh, sorry. Applied behavioral analysis. So
Okay.
it's basic training, so if you will, response therapy, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Trying to teach him, thought processes and behaviors and problem solving and all these things. And I was like, you can use our story to encourage other people. I said, but you have to tell them all of these other things that we were doing,
Hmm.
because he wasn't starting every day full of brain fog and feeling horrible because he was just struggling internally where no one was helping. Like, he was starting every day being able to remember what he did the day before. And a lot of kids in ABA don't have that. And they almost feel like they start from scratch every day for months before something starts to click because the kid's not really able to retain it because they feel so awful. And
Yeah.
so it's I was like, you can totally use that and you can tell people that there's this kind of hope, because he had about 3 years worth of progress in a year
Nice.
of that. And I was like, that's amazing. But we also did diet change, and we did all of this like major biomedical intervention. And, we hadn't quite gotten into full chelation yet, but I mean, we were really getting after all of these biomedical things. And I was like, that's clearing his head to learn the things that we're teaching him.
Right.
So it made a big difference, but we did so much of that stuff. We had a tough time with the school that we were at in kindergarten.
Mm.
um just that was a very challenging year, and I thought, you know what, if they don't love my kid through what all's going on and try to help him, why am I sending him here? So I
Yeah.
homeschooled him for 2 years after that. And part of that was during the time that we had moved to Arizona. So right after he finished kindergarten here, we moved to Arizona, and we had a doctor. We were still working sort of with the doctor in North Carolina, but we went and saw Dr. Sears. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he wrote the baby book and the vaccine book and all these things. Like, he's a very well-known public figure pediatrician
Mm.
in
Mhm.
LA County. So I badgered TRICARE till they let me go see him. I was on the phone with them a lot. So I got out there and I was like, okay, this is what we have going on. And at this point, he had been on an antifungal, an antimicrobial, and an antibacterial on and off for a year and a half. And we didn't have a whole lot of progress when he was off. When he was on the medications, we noticed a lot of, he just felt better. We noticed a lot more cooperation, things like that.
Mm.
And then when we would stop them, which of course was to give his liver a break because that's a lot of
Mm.
medication all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and then he would just start feeling terrible again. And I'm like, something's off. And that doctor really didn't have anything better. He said his words to me, his exact words to me were, he is as healed as any of the kids I work with get. And I was like, okay. Because in my head, I'm like, we haven't even gotten to chelation yet.
Right.
Like, how can this be as healed as he's going to be? And I was like, nope. So I was real big on not taking no for an answer from
Yeah.
a lot of
Moms don't.
professionals
Yeah.
that we met. Yep. And so we ended up, I called the doctor back in North Carolina and I said, all right, what's our next step? Because all he had was more medications. That was the only answer he had for me was, I mean, I can write you more prescriptions for what you've got. And I was like, oh. So the doctor in the Raleigh area said, I just went to this conference. Incidentally, they're part of a group called the Medical Academy for Pediatric Special Needs. It's a MAPS is the acronym for them. And they kind of tend to step back from traditional, you know, medicine thought processes, I guess, that
Hmm.
look at one particular area of the body as an individual instead of looking at the body as a whole and how can we figure out all these processes together. Um, so both of our doctors were in there, but Dr. Sears hadn't gone to that particular conference, and Dr. Pittman had. And so Dr. Pittman in Raleigh, he was like, all right, so we learned that Candida acts like Lyme's disease and it builds up a biofilm, protects itself. So when there's medication present, it just
Mm.
hangs out. And then when there's no medication, it kind of looks around. It's like, all right, game on, and it comes out and just wreaks havoc in his system. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
Right.
So he put us on a protocol of enzymes and specific probiotics like Saccharomyces and grapeseed extract as a natural antifungal. Put us on that thing. And within 6 months, there were such huge leaps of improvement. He felt better. He was behaving better. He was just happier.
Mm.
And, he was retaining things that we were teaching him so much faster because he was always extremely smart. It was just very hard to get it out of his head in a way that, people in the school system or whatever wanted to
Right.
quantify his knowledge. He was always super, super smart. Um, and so it was starting to like come out and show, and we were like, wow, this is really cool. So that was specifically to treat the candida. It started really, really helping. We got off of those other medications and we started eating specific carbohydrate diet, if you're familiar with that. It's another one that's designed to starve out candida. Um,
Similar to
and
FODMAP or different or
It's a little bit different. It's FODMAP is more about like inflammation and stuff, to my
right.
knowledge. And
Yes.
then the specific carbohydrate diet is really all you're eating is simple carbohydrates, like peas and
Okay.
carrots that have carbs. You're not eating complex carbohydrates at all, because the premise of it is that your gut is not healthy enough to break down a complex carb. So it needs something readily available and usable. So simple carbs it is.
Right.
And so he ate that way for a long time, about 5 years. I cooked every single thing that went in his mouth because that was the only way that we could feed him and have him feel good. So I cooked all the time.
Yeah.
And then he was doing well. He went back to school. I homeschooled him for first and second grade, like while we were doing all that stuff. And it was mostly like second grade when we did most of that protocol change and started with all the, different supplements. I want to say there were about 16 a day at that point. And I kind
16
of thought to myself,
supplements.
uh-huh. And I
That's a
thought
lot.
to myself, if I have to send him off to a school, I'm like, I'm going to sit in the nurse's office and be like, yeah, call him back in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because they won't give him anything that doesn't have a prescription label on it, right? Like they make us do that. And I'm like, there's everything is, not prescription. So I was like, yeah, we're just going to stay home and keep homeschooling. So we did that for another year and it worked out pretty well. We had an angel of a teacher in third grade that
Mm.
was very, very patient with him. And because, again, very, very smart, he was like, how can I get out of doing what I need to do? So, and he wasn't necessarily like bad at all. He was very like, if I leave the room, like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, I don't have to do that worksheet. She's like, yeah, you do. So, we worked a lot with her. She was absolutely amazing. And then fast forward another year, we had moved fourth grade, we'd moved to Alabama, where we
Mhm.
found the supplements that I currently work with because we had such a great result with them.
Mm.
Um, and I found out that the probiotic does those same exact things, except it's
Um,
all in one place. And I was like, whoa, okay, this makes a difference. So I was very, very reluctant to give him the drink because I was like, well, it's got some fiber in it that isn't legal on that specific carbohydrate diet because there's like a whole list of stuff that's
sure.
legal and not. Um, but it did have some chelating ingredients in it, the ALA,
Mm.
alpha lipoic acid in there, stuff like that. So I was like, well, maybe I should just try it and see. And I started giving that to him a little bit over a long weekend. And I'd talked with his teachers already, and they were like, you know, I basically asked them to give me feedback, good or bad, because I was like, we do a lot of supplementation, a lot of changes and things that I can't replicate a school environment at home the way that you
Right.
do. So I just need feedback so I know what's working and what's not. And they were like, great. So a few days after I started giving him that drink, we had an IEP meeting, and he suddenly, like, his focus had just gone insanely awesome. He went from, losing focus after one or two cards to copying all 20 cards down in a week. And she whipped her head around. She goes, what did you give him? And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. And I was like, I gave him a pink drink. And she goes, don't you ever stop giving that to him. He feels so great and he's focused and he's not picking at his neighbors. And I was like, awesome. Okay. Like, I won't. Um, and then come to find out it was because we'd been, working with this specific carbohydrate diet, and his blood
Mhm.
sugar was all over the place
Oh,
because
sure.
all he
Yeah.
ate was meat and vegetables and a
Yeah.
couple of fruits. And that was it. So, of course, his blood sugar was going up and down. And when that was balanced, he felt so much better. And so that was, very slowly starting some chelation. We've done some other stuff, zeolite drops and things like that,
Mhm.
over those coming years. But that supplement change made a huge difference for him. Um, it finally started to get that candida under control, which it hadn't been. I mean, we'd been diagnosed with it at that point for about 5 years, I guess, 7 years. And it was never I never felt like it was under control. And then we finally got it under control and he was feeling better. We were able to open his diet up more over the next several years. He ate dairy for the first time after 9 years
Oh, wow.
of not being able to process it because we were finally making all of this progress healing his insides and getting some of those metals out and things like that. And he started eating dairy again. Like, literally the only thing he avoids now is gluten. Um,
Mm.
unless it's fresh milled flour, which I've gotten into lately, and that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I'm just gonna squeak that little box open and close it again.
So there was
But
a significant transition and change after, what'd you call it, the think drink?
the pink drink. Yep.
Pink drink.
Pink drink. Yep.
What is the pink drink?
That is basically the pioneer supplement from Plexus. And it
Plexus.
was, yeah, the one thing that, I swore I didn't need. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with these supplements. I didn't think that it would be any good at all. And I was shocked at the ingredients in that probiotic because it was specifically enzymes, antifungals, and probiotics that help to control
Mm.
candida. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then, the pink drink with balancing blood sugars and all the things it helped, like I said, with, getting some of those metals out. And when we were in Alabama, when we found that, and we actually have a doctor that was kind of going through
Mm.
and, found a new doctor there that was going through, and he can do all the testing and see that some of those metal numbers were actually coming down
Oh,
without
wow.
having to do like severely invasive stuff. Like, he was drinking a delicious drink and starting to really feel better. So I was like, okay, we're good.
Yeah, that's pretty
So,
incredible.
yep. And he still drinks it to this day,
Oh,
every
really?
single day. Yep. Yep.
I would say when the part about that, when you're like, oh, he's more focused just because his blood sugar is under control, even if it
Hmm.
wasn't, even if we didn't have the context of everything prior in your son's experience, I think that by itself is a giant message. It's just like
Yes.
blood sugar control for kids and for people in general, but for
Yep.
kids is so important. Like if
Oh, yeah.
the mood swings and the attention to detail and the focus level, everything that we would notice, like so much is just tied to unstable blood sugar. Everything is
Yep.
tied to unstable blood sugar.
Exactly. Well, like you were saying earlier, all of these processes and these glands and endocrine system and immune system and all these things are all talking to each other, but insulin's your master hormone.
Right.
So if your insulin sensitivity is all off and your blood sugars are going crazy, then nothing else is working quite right because all the signals are mixed up and they're getting off on the wrong exits on the road. And, it's a
Yeah.
traffic jam in there.
Oh yeah, streetlights aren't
So,
working at all. That's the great
exactly.
analogy. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well that's good to know. So this is the pink drink is from Plexus. That I'm sure that'll
Hmm.
knowing that there's something that is that pivotal is really
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I was shocked at the difference. And honestly, we stopped doing a lot of the other things that we were doing before that. He was on, like I said, like 16, I think, supplements the years
Wow.
prior, and all he takes now is the Plexus supplements, um, and an NAC, which I found is really good with COVID times and all that. NAC is
Yeah.
just a helpful
Yeah.
little thing to throw in there. So I don't mind doing some other stuff, but that I just haven't found a whole lot that he needs outside of that. He takes omegas and all the things from there
Mhm.
as well, but just keeping all of those things working in his body has been absolutely tremendous for him.
Yeah.
um, he stopped doing ABA when we moved back over here or back to North Carolina, I should say, when he was in starting fifth grade. No ABA, no
Okay.
pullouts in school, no nothing. Done. I I held on to the IEP just to be sure we had it in place should we need it in middle school. Didn't even need it. But if you're familiar at all with IEPs, they're very, very difficult to get going. So, like, it takes months and months and months and all these meetings and all these, visits to specialists to get an IEP going. But then once it's going, it's easier to keep it going. So, we had very small tasks like, just some social fine tuning or something. Like, and it was just almost nothing. But I was like, I just need something that we can call a goal and sort of work towards it just to
Yep.
make sure that he's good in middle school. Sure enough, he was good in middle school. Really, the only thing that he kind of has left over from all of the health struggles that he had in the beginning is a little bit of focus. Um, and he takes again a supplement for that, that is just three ingredients, and it's another plexus one that I found that again I was reluctant to give it to him because I was like, oh, I don't know, and then I did. I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I start this sooner? He went from not being able to really tell me about his day to I did this and this, and he described a whole science experiment, and I was like, whoa, because he'd never done that, because every single thing that went into his ears and his eyes all
Yeah.
got the same amount of attention from his brain, which is kind of what the whole, attention deficit and all that stuff is.
Right.
He doesn't have any diagnosis like that at all. And if I took him now to any doctor, they wouldn't give him a diagnosis of anything. There's no way,
Hmm.
not a chance. It was a very, very long and hard road. And I will say that I know that our specific journey is not like anybody else's. And
Right.
I've had a lot of people tell me over the years, well, that's great for you, but what if it doesn't help me? I'm like, I can't tell you what it's going to do to help you. And I read in a book one day, and I can't remember what book it was, but it was something about analogy of it's like being hit by a bus. You can recover, but everybody's going to recover to a different extent
Hmm.
because the person is getting different kinds of support from the people around them. They have a different motivation level. They have different biology things going on in their body, biological things that are helping them, things that are slowing things down. Their immune systems are all different. Like everything is different.
Right.
So two people can be hit by the same type of bus at the same speed and the same type of injuries, and one's going to come back and make a full recovery, and one's barely going to be mobile.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have anything to do with the accident itself. It has everything to do with how much you're willing to put into the recovery. And so I
Mm.
think that's a big thing. And even if you put everything in it and you don't fully recover, you're still better off than where you were. So
Right.
that's kind of what I want to throw out there about hope. Because when I tell people that that's a full recovery, they kind of go, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe it wasn't whatever, maybe and they like to
Yeah.
tell my story for me.
Lots of invalidation. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I don't say that to invalidate anything, but I just say that to go, okay, there's a big spectrum of recovery, just like there's a
Right.
spectrum that they get diagnosed on at whatever time. So everything's a little bit different. Everything that you need to heal within the body to help the brain balance back out, like
Right.
all of those things are going to be a little different. And there's a lot that goes into it. Finding the right specialist was huge. Like I said, we talked to multiple doctors, um, and some helped and some didn't so much. Pediatricians, like average pediatricians, were really not very kind to me over the years.
Right. Which
They
is
were
so
they were
upsetting to
nice, but
hear.
they were very condescending.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And I think that's just people's gripe with most traditional Western medicine is they don't listen, they're invalidating,
Hmm.
they're condescending. And I don't
Right.
know if it's just because they don't do you feel like they just don't believe people or they just can't actually like why, in your opinion?
Honestly, I feel like a lot of it is they don't believe it because they are taught and it's beat into their head
There's no
that
other way.
that's not possible
Yeah.
and that there's no way. And so they're taught by a whole group of people, and this is like a whole nother soapbox.
Oh
They're
yeah.
taught by a group of people that are, making money off of medications and treatments and things like that. And so the vast preponderance of everybody that I know in the medical profession, like they're amazing. They care about people. They want you to feel better. They want to help. That's why they started out in it. That's why they went there. The
Yeah.
problem is they're taught that the only way to help is with medications and different treating the symptom type stuff. They're not
Right.
taught about root causes. They're not taught about any of this other stuff. And so I feel like there's just that dissonance of, if you have any kind of alternative thought process, then the medical field isn't taught about it, and they're taught very specifically that those things do not work. It's whatever kind of crazy voodoo medicine, whatever,
Yeah.
like they just, they're very, very staunch on that. And so it's nice that there are a lot of people now starting to open up their mind to the fact that it doesn't have to all be medication. Like,
Right.
we are really, really great at trauma care
Yeah.
here, like we can fix things, we can patch you up, we can acute care and illness, all the things, but as far as health goes, I think we've got a long way to go on creating true health for people in this country. And I think that that's going to take, again, more medical professionals with open minds and things like that, that are willing to look at the alternative thought processes and go, oh, maybe I'll give that a day in court.
Okay, so we're just recovering some catastrophic technical difficulties. Computer just completely froze and restarted. That's the second time that's happened. And I won't
Oh
bother to tell you
no.
what we were talking about the other time. And I was just like, why does it always happen with the mildly controversial stuff? But it's anyway,
Yeah,
to
right.
recap,
Is that an
so
accident?
ingredient wise,
Yes.
was there, so we had enzymes, antibiotics, antifungals. There are a number of distinct things that seem to help that are in that
Yes.
Plexus beverage. Was there ever a specific, was that the chelation part of it? or were there other things that you did for specific metal chelation as well, other than the drink?
The alpha lipoic acid is a chelator, so that
Right.
did help some. That is one of the ingredients in there. I mean, its primary job is to balance your blood sugars. Its primary job is not to
Right.
chelate heavy metals, but alpha lipoic acid is in there, and that does kind of do that on a very, very slow, gradual, and maintainable progress speed, I guess. And we did start using I think it's the zeolite drops,
Mhm.
the TRS drops, toxin removal system, I think is what that is.
Yeah.
We did start using those, and we just we go on and off of those. Don't necessarily do it all the time. We did it for a while and it was super helpful. And then we just kind of stopped for a while to see how we did. And he was doing a lot better. So,
Mm.
um, at this point, he doesn't necessarily do anything specific for chelation anymore, except we are very careful about what goes in as far as
Right.
water and things like that. Like we're very aware of that. That being said, he's 18.
Mm.
He's got his vehicle and he's got his girlfriend and his job and he's got a bunch of friends and he's always out and about and doing things. And, you know, I'm sure that he's not as careful as I would as
Yeah.
I would be or as I would want him to be, but he's 18 and he's gonna have fun and that's great. Um, but he is careful about like he drinks the water that we have at home that's more careful. He does alkaline water with us most of the time. Um, and like I said, sometimes we get him doing the zeolite stuff again, but he continues to do that pink drink every day
Mm.
because it just helps with so much in addition to kind of help slowly chelating those metals out. So,
Right. And was he super active during school? Like, was there a lot of sweating or anything like that? Was he moving around a lot, or was there other things that you think helped as well, other than diet?
um, I don't, he really honestly, he did a lot of sweating just running around playing when he was
Right.
younger, like elementary age stuff. Once he got into middle school, he did basketball kind of in the beginning, and then he got involved with MMA.
Uh,
So he definitely does a whole lot of sweating
sure.
and working hard at MMA. He is a brown belt now, so he's been in there for a little over 6 years, I think. And he's incredible,
Yeah, that'll
absolutely
do it.
incredible.
I was going to ask about sauna or anything like that, but if you're doing any type of intense martial art, that's all of that
Yes.
combined. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it helps with everything and just focus and self-control and he's sweating all the stuff out like it
Mm.
helps with a ton of things. Although we're building right now and one of the things aside from a wonderful water system that we want to put in our new house is a sauna. We want to get a far infrared sauna. So I'm excited to have him come and like try the sauna out with us and see how he feels and it's so nice to be able to now go, hey man, how's this working for you? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is great, or I didn't feel any different, or whatever. He knows what feeling good is supposed to be. He knows what his body is supposed to feel like and how it's supposed to function. So, we can have those conversations now, and he knows, if he's eaten something that wasn't a good idea for his body or whatever, like he
Mm.
knows. So it's really awesome. He's totally my hero. All the stuff he's been through, he is my hero, 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
that's a gimme.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we've had some conversations about it lately, and he'll ask me a bunch of questions and stuff, and I'm just like, I would do any of it and all of it over again because he's worth it. You know,
Yeah.
it was a tough journey of trying to figure out the things that we needed to heal because it wasn't mainstream.
Right.
And nobody was really talking about it then. And now it's starting to kind of come out a little bit more that there are these options and that there are things like 80% of kids that get that diagnosis also have extreme gut dysbiosis,
Yeah.
like 80 something percent or more. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But those tests weren't out there 15 years ago. Nobody
Right.
was talking about that. So
Do you think
it
that
was,
it was so this is the big question is we probably acknowledge that almost all of that was toxicity. Do you think there's other
Mhm.
things other than we're just being poisoned that could lead to something like that? Like, have you run into other kids or in your own experience, do you think that most of that was literally just toxicity and poisoning, or were there other things that you've come across as well?
Um, Really and truly, I think it's just been toxicity and
Yeah.
poisoning from different avenues.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that I've talked to over the years, that have kids who were vaccine injured, all of those and they have similar, different, similar but different outcomes, as far as diagnoses and things like that. But they all have vaccine injury issues. That's all toxins in there.
Mm.
Then we're getting it from the foods, the way that we process our foods, the way that we treat it when it's growing with like glyphosate and all that. I mean, now they're starting to talk. I've been talking about glyphosate for 15 years.
Yeah, same.
And now, right. And now they're just now kind of talking mainstream about it just within, recent years, recent maybe couple of years, I've heard it more mainstream. And
I'll
even
credit
then it's
Zach
still
Bush for
not
that.
mainstream.
No, it's not. There's plenty of people who would just be like,
Yeah.
it's generally recognized as safe. And I'm just like, go to a farm. Like you can I
Yeah.
appreciate the doctors like Zach Bush. I always mention him because he's a big enough voice. Just go to a farm.
Yeah.
And most of the people who are just looking at like white papers from the companies that make this stuff, they're like, where's the proof? I'm like, just go to a farm and then you'll change your mind.
Yep.
Like boots on the ground, you can tell when someone is involved in like the ecosystem or is mildly aware of their body. It's not a far stretch to be like, we're ingesting pesticides, entire chelation agents, antibiotics. Like that was originally developed to be an antibiotic, meaning just to
Yep.
kill things. So yeah, there's all of
Yeah.
this. And like you mentioned, the gut lining is just, he has a product now that is specifically for gut lining repair. It's called Intelligence of
Yeah.
Nature. I'm trying it. The gut lining is everything.
Well, and that has a lot to do with collagen, right?
What's that?
The gut lining.
Go for it. I'm open to
I
learning.
I learned I learned that recently, and I was like, because I had leaky gut myself,
Yeah.
and I started on my Plexus products, and they did amazing, and I was feeling so much better. Um, just wasn't crabby and puffy and ugh anymore. Like I just felt lousy, and the doctors were like, "Oh well, that's normal for your age." This was 10 years ago when I was 40, and they were like, "That's normal for your age." I'm like, no. I'm like, if I feel this bad at 40 and this crabby and irritable and just like gross, what am I going to feel like when I'm 50
Yeah.
or
Opt
60? Well,
out. Yeah.
thankfully now at 50, I feel amazing. So, um, but a few years ago, I want to say it was around 2020, we did a collagen loading challenge.
Mm,
Now, if you're familiar with leaky gut and like proteins getting out and stuff like that,
yeah.
so anything that you eat a lot of or eat regularly, your body, because those proteins are leaking out of the sides of the gut,
Yeah.
right? It's all
Throws an allergy
inflamed.
out.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so then your body mounts an allergy response and you can't eat it because you feel rotten. Like I would eat, oddly enough, mine was Brussels sprouts because I love Brussels sprouts, like
Hmm.
roasted. And so I would eat them, and my knuckles would hurt and ache, like are almost arthritic. And I'm like, what in the world? Couldn't figure out what it was. And so even after I felt so much better with my supplements, that didn't go away. And I still couldn't eat Brussels sprouts. I could eat a couple and I was okay, but if I ate like a serving, it was rough. And we did this collagen loading challenge, and it was something that I think Dr. Axe talked about. And, he's
Hmm.
kind of here or there for me. Like some of it's good,
Sure.
some of it's I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So whatever, take it or leave it. But I'll go research stuff, and figure out what I want to do because I love the science. I really
Right.
do, but I find it in certain places and not others. Um, so we figured out, we did a bunch of digging into collagen, things like that, and it was literally talking about your gut lining is made of collagen, and I was like, oh my gosh. And of course, what does collagen production do when you're aging?
Right.
Starting at like 21, you start losing collagen production. Like it just goes down and down and down. So, and I had already been told that I had like basically none. They're like, you really need to supplement with collagen. This was that doctor I told you about in Alabama that did
Yeah.
all this testing with Chris. And so I already knew I needed collagen, and I had been taking it, but I'd been taking one serving a day. And it was like, I stopped and I thought about it. I was like, okay, that's kind of like, learning that much of it was collagen. I was like, that's kind of like building a house and trying to get them to like frame the entire house out and like, here's 3 boards and 2 nails.
Right. Yeah.
Like they're not going to get anything done. So I've asked my body to rebuild this lining and gave it literally almost nothing to do it with. And I was like, huh. So we did collagen loading. I did 3 servings a day for, I think they said to do it for at least 30 days. And I ended up doing it for about 90 because I noticed a difference when I went back
Mm.
down after 30 days. So I did it for about 90 days. I did 3 servings of collagen a day. And I have no problem eating Brussels sprouts or, potatoes, like any of the
Oh,
things that
wow.
were bothering my system before, because like I said, it was like trying to get it to rebuild and giving it like almost nothing that it needed to actually do it. So I got rid of all the things that were causing the leaky gut, but I didn't have that structure in place to rebuild it. So yeah, if you're looking at gut lining protocols, make sure you're doing some collagen loading stuff
I
in
was
there.
looking at collagen for other things, and I've been doing it off and on forever, but I had no idea
Yep.
about that because the gut lining is such a mass, like it's in the focus right now, along with
Right.
we're finally understanding like what the microbiome, the whole thing that always
Yep.
amazes me is when I was in high school, AP biology, they made it sound like we had everything figured out. They're like, we know how the body
Right.
works, we know how metabolism works. All of this new amazing science,
Hmm.
genetics is coming on board. And now we're just like, we're still figuring out what your gut lining is. Like all
Yeah.
of the small things that it sounded like we had well figured out and quote established science and now I just
Yes.
learned that collagen is what the gut lining is made of. Like all the little
Yeah.
details that are
Yep.
amazing. And you
I
said you
know. I
did,
don't remember. I was in all those AP classes
yeah,
too in high school, and I don't remember. I took biology classes in college. Like, I don't remember learning anything about
anything.
like
Correct.
microbiome stuff.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I love about Plex and stuff now. Is like, we're like, the original microbiome focused company. Like,
Yeah.
we started this whole microbiome thing. We've been talking about it for 17 years.
Yeah. And it'll take another 17 years for people to be,
Probably so.
it takes 17 years for quote established science to be like, oh, I guess there's something here. Like it just moves so slowly and it's obnoxious. But
Yeah.
that's why I like doing conversations like this because you leapfrog from getting other people's experiences because
Yes.
people experience like you have to fix a problem. Like if your son is
Yep.
nonverbal, like you said, mothers move heaven and earth, and
Yep.
I am a fan of the trial and error experience more so than I mean, yeah, digging through research is necessary for a lot, figure out mechanisms and why something
Hmm.
might be working, but it's hard to beat figuring out how your own personal body works and learning the
Yeah.
sensitivities. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like so much of that right now is people going, well, but we don't need that. I've been fine. I've been fine. I don't need to do all that.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but if you're noticing these types of things, you're noticing allergies, you're noticing all this stuff, like, what is it that you're going to wish you would have done down the road?
Yeah.
Because I was like, you know what? You might tell me that diet change isn't going to make any difference. But if 20 years down the road, they're like, oh my gosh, it was the food. All this time, it was the food. Because, like you said, the science is always slow to
Yeah.
say that's what it was. So, what if 20 years down the road, they told me diet change would help? And I poo pooed the idea when I was told about it and didn't do
Yeah.
it. I was like, I would kick myself,
Yeah.
probably worse. But, like I would be so upset if I was like, oh my gosh, I was told that and I didn't even want to
Yeah.
try it. It's not like it's radical, it's not crazy, it's nothing, to go, well, you know what? How about we eat this stuff instead of this stuff and see how things go? I mean, yeah, there's more of a process to it, but the like you said, broad strokes,
Yeah. Yeah.
of like, why would you not try it? And
Yeah.
something as simple as going, you know what? I'm going to be aware of this and try to do things differently. I'm going to be aware of avoiding glyphosate. I'm going to be aware of looking for toxic metals and things like that, getting my water tested, making sure I'm ingesting good stuff. Because, and I don't think I mentioned it on here yet, but that doctor that we have in Alabama who did testing, he actually told us when we were all tested, myself, my husband, and all 3 of our kids, we all had anti-seizure medication in our bodies.
That's right. I
None of
forgot
us
that
have
part.
ever taken an anti-seizure medication in our entire lives. We all had it in our systems. And he said, you know what? I see that here all the time because it's in the water.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, yikes. So it's one of those things of like, sometimes you want to just be like, be happy in your, in your not knowing, not caring vibe.
Right.
You're like,
Ignorance is
yeah, I'm
bliss.
good.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be oblivious to all that. I don't even want to know. But if you can open your eyes to what's actually there, then you can make better choices going forward. And it's just going to do nothing but benefit you in the long run. So,
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I've pared down the way I look at chronic anything or disease and sickness as our bodies are really good healing machines, and they
yes.
a need basic nutrition, like they need the building blocks, and environmental
Hmm.
toxicity. So it's either almost always, like, genetics is a thing, but from what I've seen in my experience, it's you either missing a building block or it's an environmental toxin. Like, you're either
Right.
eating a
That's
toxin, you're either
blocking
being
that building
poisoned
block, like you were
or you're
talking
deficient
about.
in something. Other than that, your body is
Yep.
really good at healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And even with those things, a lot of times the body will just compensate for
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Like you can have some of these imbalances or some of these, environmental toxins or whatever, and your body just compensates.
Yep.
And although that's very helpful, it doesn't necessarily make for a good long-term solution.
Right. Yeah. If you're not getting a certain nutrient, it'll pull it from someplace else. And
Right.
yeah, and this is why I work in water, because it's the quintessential of both of those things. I mean, it's easy, which is
Yes.
also nice, but it's the quintessential. You're probably being poisoned. Also, you're missing a raw nutrient. Yeah, so most people
Yes,
are dehydrated
exactly.
and drinking all of the stuff that we're talking about. Glyphosate. I just pulled a water report yesterday from Texas. Lots of atrazine in the water, heavy
Mm.
pesticide
Yeesh.
and heavy
Yeah.
metals. Like that is the source. Obviously, food's a big one, but if you have no idea and you're drinking water with
Yeah.
all of that in it, it has literally every industrial contaminant that's ever been made that runs off
Yeah.
the road. It just ends up in the water, and they just don't have
And
filtration for it.
and what are they watering all these crops with?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly
And then it
that.
ends up on
So
the
how does it
foods
get
and
in the food?
irrigation.
The
Yeah.
water. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Exactly.
just kind of all comes back to it. But yeah, I mean, and it makes a huge difference when your water is nourishing your body instead of causing more problems.
Yeah, the effects people see from changing their water are what you would see kind of like if you went from just eating heavily processed junk food to nourishing food. You're removing the poisons and
Yep.
you're giving your body like basic nourishment at the same time, and people feel like they just level up in life. And you're just like, what
Yeah.
happened? And you're like, well, you stopped poisoning yourself and you gave yourself fundamental nutrition. So that's how your body is designed to feel.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I say that a lot. Like you never know how good you're designed to feel until you really get to the root cause of things
Yeah.
and you start to realize like, oh my gosh, because I mean, I feel better at 50 than I did when I was 20
That's huge. Yeah.
because I didn't eat well and I didn't have generally a healthy lifestyle for most of my life. And my body showed it. Things didn't work right. And for a while, it compensates really well. And then
Yeah.
later on, it goes, yeah, I'm done compensating. Things are rough now.
Yeah. Yeah. Too many things to manage. Your NID levels dip, your collagen levels
Yep.
dip. Like, as soon as a lot of those fundamentals start dipping, then you start feeling it. It's usually just a long term, slow grinding of everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Slowly
And then it takes
entering.
time to undo all those
Right.
things. It takes time with healthy habits and drinking clean water and eating good quality foods without pesticides and supplementing and all. Like it takes time with all of those things to undo years of, screwing up all the pathways in the body.
Yeah. I had before we leave the chelation conversation, I wanted to touch on just
Yeah.
briefly because we're running up on time. Um, You mentioned that he had tried zeolite from TRS. Was there any
Mhm.
other of the normal ones people hear about? So whenever I think of heavy metals, I always hear and think about carbon. So like activated charcoal, zeolite always pops up, cilantro, chlorophyll based things. Did any of those have, or did you try any of the ones other than zeolite and notice anything with Chris?
We did a lot of activated charcoal when we were
Yeah,
doing detoxification stuff,
right.
just as a more as a binder
Binder.
than actually for pulling the metals out.
Right.
So we did some activated charcoal kind of on and off with different protocols through the integrative specialist we were working with.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we own a fast casual Mexican restaurant, so he eats a lot of cilantro.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But I mean, nothing specific as far as
Nothing
like taking
huge.
that
Yeah.
as a supplement or anything like that. Really, that's mostly what we did. We did several like DMSA rounds with the first, one of the first doctors we were working with. We did a few rounds of that with
Yeah.
him. But it was one of those where we kind of like changed trajectory not too long after we had started into that because it took us a long time to get through the rest of the healing so that his body was ready to get rid of that stuff.
Oh, sure.
So,
Yeah, good point. Um, the zeolite, this is wildly popular, and I've tried it a couple times.
mhm.
Did he notice, did you pulse it off and on to see if it was actually doing anything, or because you didn't want to do it long term, or what was did he notice anything from the zeolite, and what was kind of the thought process behind the on a couple months, off a couple months?
I mean, he did feel like he was focusing better. Like
Okay.
he said it was easier for him to pay attention to stuff.
Mm.
But then after a while, it just didn't really seem to be having any major changes. I was like, well, let's just take a break. I mean, it's expensive. It's not cheap stuff
Yeah.
to go through all this stuff. So I'm like, we'll just take a break for a little bit and see what happens. And then we tried it again, and he didn't seem to notice a huge difference at that point. So I was like, you know what? Whatever. He takes enough stuff. I'm not going to force him to
Yep.
do extra
Right.
stuff if it's not really making a significant change, because I'm all about empowering him at this point to make his own smart decisions, which he is so good at. He's
Right.
so
Oh,
awesome
I'm
at it.
sure at this point,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so I don't force him to do any of this stuff. I'm like, "Hey, here you go. This is what's good and this is why, and you can decide if you feel good enough with this or good enough with that. Like, you decide. Let's figure it out." And he's like, "Okay." So
Mm.
he does a good job of knowing how his body is supposed to feel and paying close attention to it.
Okay, that's good to know. Is
Mhm.
the DMSA, is it dimethyl sulfoxide or is it something completely else? DMSA.
That sounds right. That's a
Is it
deep pull from
DMSO?
15. No, no, it's
It's DMSA.
DMSA, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so it's something
Um,
else.
but it sounded something like that. It's been 15 years.
Yeah, I know. Well, good. Yeah, it's just a sulfur-based compound. But I used to have this. I lived with a very holistically minded person. She had a jug of DMSO. I didn't know if it was the
Oh,
same thing
okay.
or something completely different.
It might be a similar version, but something
Gotcha.
slightly different. But the
Tweaked. Yeah.
the beginning sounded very familiar. So I don't know. It's
I'll
been a
look
long
that up,
time.
and yeah, I'll do a little research myself and put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
That was a really, I appreciate the walk through the journey. I hope that that helps someone just with any bit of that. And it sounds like there's a number of things, and everyone's scenario is different. So maybe a piece of that, or the enzymes, or the antifungal, or just the candida link,
Yep.
or something, will probably maybe serve as a turning point in someone else's experience. Or the collagen.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a big one. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I'd already been in gut health stuff for 6 years at that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, 13 if you count the 7 that I spent, diving deep into it as we were recovering him, but like a long time. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's collagen loading. It makes so much sense. Um, so yeah, there's lots of different things you can do, and there's so many pieces to the puzzle, but I think they're different for everybody.
Yes.
So, there are lots of things you can try, and what works for one person isn't necessarily going to have the same result for somebody else. But, if it's stuff that is not like heavily medication and heavily, bad side effect focused, why would you not try it?
Yeah,
That's my
exactly.
thought
Right.
process.
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen? And I found, I think
Right.
you were correct. DMSA does this sound more familiar? Dimer captosuccinic acid.
Yes.
Okay. So that one came up as a bunch of doctors with detoxing heavy metals. So
Yes.
probably that one for anyone
Yeah,
wondering.
he didn't tell me the full name many times, but that does sound familiar. It was definitely DMSA.
Yeah.
And then we
Okay.
would do that and like, yeah.
Yep.
save save things and do testing. So it
Well, yeah,
was
no one would ever need to remember the full thing, but just in case anyone's looking it up and they're like, oh, there's a bunch of DMSAs. Yeah, dimer captosuccinic acid. I'm probably butchering that
yeah.
name, but something like that. Yeah. I really
Yes,
appreciate your time,
it
Allison.
absolutely. It was great to sit and chat about it, and hopefully that can give somebody else some hope to just try a few things and see what happens. I mean,
Yeah.
there's, like you said, there's simple stuff like the kind of water you're drinking. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a great start. The kind of food that you're eating, the kind of supplements that you're taking. There's so many simple things that you can make changes to, and you never know how great it could be.
Yeah, and they're not like $50,000 surgeries, so it's not
Right.
like there's no huge barrier to do it under medical supervision, obviously, but they're relatively simple everyday habits, which I really love.
Right. And some of those things you can do.
Yep.
I mean, you don't necessarily have to go to your doctor and be like, hey, can I drink a different kind of water?
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's some things you can do without medical supervision. But then when you're diving deep into like recovery stuff, like our
Yeah.
journey, yeah, absolutely. Go and talk to somebody. But having these different pieces of the puzzle to help is just huge. And knowing that there is hope and that there are families out there, because I am definitely not the only one. I mean, I've
No,
met
yeah.
numerous people, just personally, who over the last 15-ish years who have recovered their kids.
Yeah.
And some of them were far more challenging than our situation was. Like there was, major, major hurdles to overcome that we didn't have. So I mean, anything is possible if you can figure out what's going on within the body. And a lot of times, like I said, that's going to take a specialist for that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
you can do some basics that are going to help.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. If anyone
because I mean,
wanted
it's
to
it's not cheap to go through all that doctor stuff,
no, right,
but
yeah, I imagine. Yeah, hopefully that your experience can, yeah, maybe save some people the some years would be nice. Maybe you can cut the
yes,
time down. Yeah. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
if people wanted to learn about more gut health, about where to reach you, where would they look? How can people find you?
Probably the easiest thing is just online. I mean, I'm on social media with Healthy with Allison, and I guess you could put that in the show notes. So it's
Yeah.
ALYSUN. So I'm on Instagram there. I'm on Facebook. Have a website for it that kind of talks about all that stuff, and I'm happy to answer questions and help with anything supplement wise or other kinds of health options and things that we
Yep.
can change and talk about. I'm here for it. I just want people to feel their best.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you.